Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Welcome everybody for Guest Thursday, and we have a continuation actually from last week. We had Alex McKinnon. He's from Tampa, Florida, a neighbor of Dave and Melissa Dunkel. I guess if you live on that block, Kathy, your name has to be Melissa. Alex's wife is also named Melissa. So they've had a great relationship already where, you know, he moved next to Dave and through a series of things. Dave, who's the chairman of C12, facilitated just processing, and not even as cool, because I remember actually being part of that a little bit, where he wasn't saying, Alex, you should. He said, well, let's go find out what God has to say, and he led you into that. And you talked last time about the beautiful process of redemption just in your life, and then having a very successful business with your dad, selling that, and then you said, well, now what? And God, through a series of things, led you to C12, and then to actually purchase Scott and Terry's area, where you now have, I think you said you have 5 groups, and then Terry has 2. He has 2 additional groups, right? Additional to your 5. You have 5, and he's got 2.
Scott has 2, and then we have another chair also who has 4 other groups.
Oh, really? Wow, that's a big area.
Tampa is hopping, huh?
Yeah, that's a big deal.
That's amazing.
And Alex is the big shot over it all.
Servant.
Yeah, that's right. No, he's leading it all and through that. And you said last time about that you were your kids. I think your own personal youngest was it 15 or 17? That it's your youngest.
11. 11-year-old. Yeah.
11. Okay, and you had children of your own, and then you had 4 of yours with Melissa. Mm-hmm. And then you know, by the way, I've got a baby foster kid, and we didn't really process that much, but Kathy and I both said,
yeah, I would love to
that's
hear
kind of
story.
interesting. How did you get led into that to go do that?
So one of my members, he runs a nonprofit called A Door of Hope. And what the Door of Hope does in the Tampa Bay community is they go to the churches and they say, hey, look, we really don't have any orphans in America today, but our modern day orphans are foster children. His name is Godly Daniel, who is the executive director of this organization called the Door of Hope. And basically what he does is he says, look, you know, in James, pure religion is you take care of widows and orphans in their time of distress. So church, if you feel like God's calling you to help solve this problem, and you feel like you want to become foster parents, we'll step you through this process. So every step of the way through the licensing and all the rules and requirements and everything will help you get licensed. And in our community,
there's a lot involved in all of that, though.
Yeah, it's a very involved process, and it's very intrusive, right? It's a very intrusive process. So they help you. They help you a lot. I think they also help you don't quit, because there are times where you're like, this is ridiculous. We're not going to go any further. So anyway, and in our community, half of the children that are in foster care, which is about 5,000 children in the Tampa Bay area, are through faith-based foster groups, right? Which is kind of a cool thing. So that's when we first kind of learned about it. So,
and how did that develop further?
So, you know, we went to their gala, and you had Tony Dungy, who's a football coach, right? He and his wife have 13 children, right? And so So she spoke, his Tony Dungy's wife spoke. It's funny, and they're strong believers. And she said Tony's afraid to go out of town because every time he goes out of town, I grab another child. So my wife connected with her and talked with her, and then my wife, we just started processing this idea of, God has blessed us. We live we have a house that's plenty big enough. My wife is able to stay home and kind of manage the home and stay on top of all the kids' activities. And, our kids are getting 11-year-old, 12-year-old. She's becoming more and more independent, doesn't need mom or dad as much. And so we just started processing this about 2 years ago, whether we would become foster parents or not.
Was there a particular point when God just really brought confirmation to the both of you, brought you to unity and saying, hey, this really is what I have for you?
Yeah, I think that the confirmation that we had was just to continue the process, right? So it was like,
that's good.
So how the process works is you kind of get started. You fill out an application, then you go to the next step, then you go to the next step, then you go to the next step. And so for us, it was like this continuously processing this. And at any time, Melissa and I were like, well, if we feel like this isn't what God wants us to do, we can kind of step out at any time. You're not really committed. And then kind of COVID hit. And then that changed the whole foster care dynamics, slowed everything down. Kids, less kids came into care. The whole system kind of,
a lot of checks and balances in the system that actually would identify kids needing foster care were affected.
Right. The places where they would see, like, kids weren't in school, and that's one of the places
and that's where a lot of the identification comes.
Kids weren't in daycare because daycares were closed. So lots of places where they would see that children maybe needed help were kind of that, all that changed. So
How did you and your wife come to a conclusion about that? How did you come into agreement that this was God's will for you? Obviously, there's reasons to do it, not to do it. What were you led to that confirmed, yes, this is something that you're being asked to introduce into your family?
We had we met with a lot of people who were foster parents, people that we had known, and they talked about how, in Florida, as in most states, the objective is to try to reunify these children with their biological parents. And so what we heard incredible opportunities to be able to share the love of God with families. So it's not just the children, it's the mothers, and it's the fathers, and it's the people that have had their children taken away from them. And so we just really felt like it was almost an evangelistic opportunity to be able to show the love of Christ to certainly the children, but parents. And then a great thing for our kids, right? With 11, 13, 15, 17, we live in a fairly affluent part of Tampa, and I think for them to be able to see, okay, we can read about doing good works, but hey, we're actually going to live what we read about. So it's been cool though.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long have you had the baby now?
Her name's Victoria.
Victoria,
we've had her for a month. Right?
Okay.
So
and
in the
how
beginning,
is the
and even now,
that's hard, right?
Yeah. Well, Addison is our 11. She's almost 12, right? So it's been a decade since we've had a 2-year-old in our house, like continuously.
You forget the energy level, right?
Yeah. So it's a little bit at first, and even now, it's still a little bit. A shock to the system, so to speak, but it's been a blessing. I mean, our children have accepted her and loving her like a sister. I think she's doing pretty well, and it's an opportunity, right, for us to pray for the restoration of her family, pray for her brother. She has a brother that's a year older than her, to pray for her soul, to pray that all the days of her life that she would, that she would follow Jesus, keep her eyes on Jesus. We pray to cry out to the Lord to love her, to protect her, to to watch over her. It's an incredible, I think, an incredible blessing to have her.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. And as you, obviously you've learned about the ask, seek, and knock process, which sounds like you did. You went and talked to people, processed.
Yep.
You're getting information. God's going to confirm it, one way or the other, which is how it goes. How did you kind of get into the abiding, and what does that specifically look like for you, and how you then introduce it to your C12 people?
Yeah. So after I decided, processing this thing had become a chair, all of a sudden I get Dave said, "Hey, we have this weekly call that I've got some C12 chairs, and Rich is on the call and I'm on the call. And I think it'd be really good for you to learn more of the nuts and bolts of this whole abiding process now that you're a chair." And I said, "Sure. Okay." So tuned in and we gathered, weekly for a long period of time. And I learned so much about kind of the nuts and bolts of the abiding process. Mm-hmm. But, I'm kind of a hard-headed equipment guy, right? So I'm like trying harder, trying, not getting it. It's not working for me. Maybe I'm too dumb to get this, to really understand it. And then we went to New Hampshire, and we went on an abiding retreat, Melissa and I. After a couple of times of trying to do that, we finally ended up going there. And I think for me, for Melissa too, that was really kind of her first, kind of, Kathy, like you, first exposure. She's like, "What are you doing? You're taking me to I'm good with a weekend away in the fall, away from the kids."
Sounds great, right?
What is this thing? What are we gonna do?
What are you taking me to? Yeah.
And I'm like, "Don't worry.
It's a cult."
Yeah, it'll be fine. But for me, I kind of had a breakthrough there on that time. And it was this, we go through this abiding thing, and part of my problem is I never really understood this idea of and hold on a second, my battery's running low.
Gotta plug it in.
Into the power outlet. Okay, there we go. I'm trying to figure out all my own problems, right? And I never really understood. I never really accepted. I intellectually got it, but accepting it to be true about this, that the Father is the vine dresser, right? That what I needed to do was all my problems and all these things and all these struggles and all these, I just needed to go to the Father, right? And it was this thing that I finally received when we were in New Hampshire. And then I remember you told this story, and it was like, maybe it was on Sunday, the last day, and we're all getting ready to leave, and you're talking about this, God works both sides of the street.
Right.
Start talking about this story of Peter and is it not Nicodemus?
Cornelius, and
you tell this story, and I'm like, I don't know why he's going. It seems like he was going on and on about it. I'm kind of listening to it. But the one thing that was clear is that when I left, I felt like I left this 100-pound bag of cement that I'd been carrying around with me, that I had to figure everything out. And I realized in New Hampshire, I didn't.
Right. That's that abiding leads to truth, and truth leads to freedom. You just nailed that in one sentence. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was unbelievable. I left that 100-pound bag of cement at Dave's place in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And then on the way back, right, the Lord is impressing upon me. So I'm freed of self. Like, it's like, I'm not obsessing with all my issues. And the Lord says, "I want you to go visit this man in Tampa." And I knew this guy, an acquaintance, but he's a bad man. He's a scary man. And I'm like, "Lord, I'll go see anybody you want, right? But I'm not going to go see that man, not that guy. No, I'll go see anyone, but not him."
I think I've heard a story like this in the Bible before.
Yeah. And I go to bed. We get home Sunday night, and I go to bed, and I get up in the morning, and this impression upon my spirit is stronger than it was the night before. And I'm finally like, all right, I will go I will go, but I'm going begrudgingly because he's scary. He's a bad person. He's a bad guy, and I don't want to go see him. So I go see him. I talked to his administrative assistant, and she said, well, he doesn't see anybody without an appointment. You're not in his calendar book. You're not going to see him. I said, well, I need to see him. And she says, why are you here to see him? And I said, well, do you really want me to tell you? And she said, yes. If you don't tell me, you'll never see him. And I said, okay, I'm here because God told me to come see him. And you should have seen her face. Her face almost hit the floor. She comes back out and she says, I can't believe it. He will see you. He will see you. And I'm like, oh, great. I was hoping I'd be sent away. Next thing you know, I'm sitting in his office, and this guy says to me, he said, he has my business card, and he's kind of mocking me. And he says, so Alex McKinnon, you're here because God told you to come see me. And I said, yes. And he starts laughing. And he says, why would God tell you to come see me? And I said, well, I don't know. I have no idea. Why do you think he would want me to come see you? And his face got white, and he just ashen almost. And he gets up and he closes the door, and he sits down at the chair, in his chair in front of me, and he starts crying.
Wow.
And he says, do you know about me? And I said, well, I know a little bit about you. And he recounts his life and his brokenness and all the money he's making and all the bad things that he's done and all that. And he said, last night I was staying in a hotel, like the top floor of a hotel. That's where he's living. And he says, I was on the balcony last night, and I have everything I thought I'd ever want in my life, and I was getting ready to jump off the roof of the hotel.
Wow.
But he said, I made a deal with God that if God would send somebody to me, I wouldn't kill myself that night. Right? And so here I am in his office the next day telling him that God had sent me to see him. And it was an unbelievable thing. I could not believe, that God, well, part of it, right? I think that God was, this guy needed somebody to come see him, kind of like me 20 years before, right? It's the same thing, right? And so I was there for him, right? To be used by God, to let him know that God loved him, and ended up hooking him up with some other people who connected well with him. And he's a Christian now. He's following the Lord and just doing great things with his life.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah. And what's the other side of the story for me, I think, right? Because God is back to this time where Rich was talking about, Cornelius kind of working God working both sides of the street. For me, it was like, Alex, if you just listen to me, if you can just tune your ears to me, focus on me, listen to me, man, I'll be able to do incredible things through you.
Wow.
But, and so that was, so abide in me, abide in the vine, listen to me. And, there's great things that can happen, right? And so that was kind of like, I think, what God was working both sides of the street, and that was the lesson. So it's like I go to this retreat in New Hampshire, I have this experience, and then God anchors it with this unbelievable thing.
It's a big exclamation point he put on what he was teaching you, right?
Here's how dumb I am. I'm gonna make it so you're gonna know. You won't forget this.
Yeah, and that's the
beautiful.
Because I remember the story. It was remarkable that, and I know because the way that you're operating, the way I operate, is that even when God said, here's what I want you to do, I know your question and my question is, well, then why? Well, I'm not telling you why, and it was interesting when you think of that story, Kathy, so you're here because God sent you. Yes. Why? And Alex said, actually, I don't even know. You tell me why.
You tell me.
He knew that other piece of the story is actually last night I said to God, if I'm going to continue, you got to send me somebody. Yeah. And obviously when we can imagine the secretary walking into the office. God has this guy, and I asked him why he's here. He said, God sent me. To him, see it.
Incredible.
Well, I asked you that last night, and you sent me you sent him this morning. That's pretty cool. That whole thing is remarkable, and what I consider to be the wonder, the joy, the beauty of God at work that you actually got to be part of,
and the adventure. You also see that stepping into the adventure, that he let you be a part of that. I mean, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah. And it was cool. And to me, again, I think I'm not sure I would have passed. Something that immediate, where you have no clue what it's all about. It would have been easy to say, I don't think so.
Right.
I guess maybe I'll do it later, or maybe I'll call the guy or whatever. No, you were fully obedient, which I believe is, it excited me at the retreat and excited me after the retreat is that, and you kind of said it, is that you kind of live a life of, in a sense, simplicity. And when it's there, it's like, okay, well then, I'll go do that. So how are you called now to help others? Which you said you have 60 guys, and you got 4 other groups, and actually 6 other groups in your area. How are you helping them to start to learn what you've learned?
Yeah, I think leading this restored life, right? Because most of them were like me, Christians, right?
Yeah.
Believers, trying to figure everything out by the flesh.
Yeah,
right? They are that, and they're trying the best they can, and they're taking their business knowledge and all their years of experience and what maybe they learned in school, the latest thing that they have read in a magazine or seen at a workshop. And right now there's just tremendous fatigue, right?
Yeah.
There's this, it's 2 weeks and we're going to flatten the curve. And when the vaccine comes, everything's going to go back to normal. But, we've got supply chain disruptions, we've got labor challenges, we got inflation through the roof. We've got unbelievable pressure on businesses, small to medium-sized businesses in general, right? So, and the leaders are growing extremely weary.
Yep.
Which is good news, because they're at the end of themselves, right? They're like, what I'm doing isn't working. It's not working well for me, right? One of your good questions. What do you ask people?
Yep. Yeah, how's that working for you?
Yeah, it's a rich case question. I use that, right? And what's funny is that people are like, it's not working very well, right? So it's a great opportunity to talk to them about, would you be interested in exploring a different way to learn how to walk with the Lord? And they're like, well, you sure? I mean, they're very open, and most of them,
recognize the need, right?
Yeah, and most of them don't. They go to church and they listen to the sermon and they do their devotions and they try to be good Christian people and all that, but they're tired. So.
Yep.
So lots of opportunities.
Yep.
So I'm starting this Friday. I'm starting a weekly call. I'm going to try to do what you did with us. I've got I think I've got 6 or 7 people that have committed, but about 15 people that have said they'd be interested.
Yeah.
So, and then this idea of encouraging people to go to abiding retreats, to go to all I encourage people to buy your books, and also to use your website, which is tremendous, right? For, what is it, $35 you can buy a course.
Yep.
And it's a great bargain.
Yeah. And
it's change your life.
Yeah, and it's as you understand it, is there's really nothing we can say do this. It's a matter of learn it by learning to walk with God, and how beautiful it is. And I think as you've had your shift, and you said it, is you were trying to figure everything out yourself, right. As a good Christian, trying to figure everything out myself, and you realize is that, well, why don't I just go to the Father and let him tell me? He's already got it figured out, and I just got to receive it, and learn it. And if that's the beautiful message, and then your story of God, like you say, accentuating that with, let me invite you to something that I'm up to, and I need you to be the messenger in this. Would you please be willing to follow me? And because of your heart, you say, okay. And that story, I mean, it's to me, it's over the top, amazing.
I'm excited for our listeners to hear this one.
that God's heart is to that level, and to puts things together that only He could do. And He's, like you say, He's working both sides of the deal. And our story is our story, but it also impacts other people because we're part of His story, God's story. So it's really cool. What are you excited about with your C2A practice going forward? What do you see going forward as what excites you as you look at the next year or two for what God's calling you?
Yeah, so our community, Tampa Bay, is a relatively kind of unchurched place, right? So only 1 in 20 of the people that live we have 3 million people that live here. Really only about 1 in 20 or 5% are really serious kind of Bible believing Christians.
Yeah.
Wow.
Only 1 in 4 would consider themselves kind of like, if you asked them if they were Christians, they would say they were Christians, right? So, and they go to church once a month, so nominal Christians.
Yep.
So, and that would include a lot of different faith groups in that. So, one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to transform our community by advancing the gospel in the marketplace. So the average C12 business has the opportunity to impact 5,000 people per year with the gospel.
That's right.
And so while many people would never go to a church, lots of people, they have jobs and they work places. And so what we really try to do is we try to get the business owners to be able to advance the gospel through the businesses that God's entrusted with them, platforms. So that's a cool thing for me, just this leveraged impact for advancing the kingdom of God and transforming our community by sharing the love of Christ through the businesses that we work through.
Yeah. So that's it. Multiplication and teaching your guys to then serve, and I think that's right. I know that he said it at the beginning of that the CEOs, the key players, are to see that their mission is right in front of them. It's their businesses, the employees, the relatives of the employees, all these opportunities that they have, and obviously Alex and his group is leading at the training the top and then training for them to give it away. And how beautiful is that, of following that multiplication model and the passion that Alex has for it and his family. And we're very excited, Alex, for what God is up to, and we'll have you back and talk more later. Come back and say, how's that mission going? What do you see as the keys to the multiplication process? And we'd love to have you back sometime down the road and talk about that as well. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And I'll truly, and I when I heard it the very first time, actually the next day after you went back from the retreat, it was so overwhelming to me. I can't even describe it. The wonder, the power, the beauty of God, and how He chooses us to be His physical representation of the invisible God on earth for the purpose of restoration. You were restored. This guy was restored. That's God's heart. Come and be with me, and I'll restore you. So, Kathy, it's beyond words, really, of how beautiful this is.
Such a phenomenal story. Thank you so much for sharing that with all of us. And thank you for joining us, everyone. I hope you found today as encouraging as I did.
Yep.
I love to see God show off and just redeem and restore. Yep. So thanks for sharing us. Yep. Thanks for joining us, Alex.
Alex, thanks for sharing. Say hi to Dave Dunkel and Melissa for us, and your wife. And we look forward to getting together.
Thank you, guys.
Right, see you soon.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
You
Thanks.
Too.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.